Good evening and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Front Page, the first of two tonight, brought to you by Community College for the spring 2019 semester here at the college. This is a show that is on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, on ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, as well as WIN 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. Former congressional candidate Dana BALTER may have narrowly lost her run to unseat Congressman John Katko in November, but it didn't mean that she would disappear from public view. Since Election Day, she has been active on several fronts and been seen at several public events and rallies. Earlier this year, she helped to found a new not-for-profit, Enter the Public Square. The goal is to increase civic participation and has several programmatic ideas to do just that. We've asked her on to join us to talk about the new group, talk about last fall's campaign, and what else she might have planned in the future. Welcome back to Beyond the Front Page.
Thank you so much for having me.
So delighted to have you because we're all about civic engagement here.
Yes.
So I want to talk about Enter the Public Square first. What is it?
It is a nonprofit organization that is focused, as you said, on building civic engagement. It's nonpartisan. It is not an organization that will get involved with campaigns or candidates, and the organization will not be taking positions on issues. The idea is really to focus on building the skills that are necessary for good civic participation, to make sure that all the members of our community feel not only the need but the ability to get involved in shaping the communities that they live in. And so we're undertaking educational programs and public meetings, and we're hoping to get to do some door-to-door work as well to bring civic engagement to the people. Find out what issues matter to you, and then provide information and resources and support so that you can engage around those issues, whatever they may be.
So let's talk organizational first. You're executive director, so it's a paid position?
No.
Okay.
The intention is to professionalize the organization and professionalize the staff. At this point, it's all volunteer.
Okay. So volunteer board of directors? Anybody we would know who's on the board?
Community members. Nobody famous at this point.
Mainly from the Syracuse area or from the 24th district or whereabouts?
Mainly from the Syracuse area.
Okay.
We are focusing a lot of our work in the Syracuse area right now. My hope is that as we get more of our footing underneath us, we can expand to cover more of the central New York area and then even beyond that. So
where did the idea come from?
It really is a culmination of a lot of things. So part of this idea comes from my work teaching citizenship and public policy, teaching at the university level and finding that a lot of my students were coming into this course having had no prior civics education. And initially, standing at the front of the classroom, that really shocked me, because one of the reasons why we have public education is to prepare people to be citizens in a democracy. But then I reflected on my own educational experiences, and I have been incredibly lucky to go to some of the best schools in the country, both public and private, over the course of my lifetime. I never once had a course in civics or government through my entire educational career. It wasn't until I went...
Does anybody ever even use the Magruder book anymore?
No. I mean, not that
I have editions from the 1970s, but I don't know if... That was the, what was it called, Magruder's American Government or something like that. I don't know if it's used anymore.
I don't know either. And the students that I talked to, the few who had any sort of real civics or government education, it would be a 6-month elective in high school. And I, of course, think that we should be teaching these things to our kids throughout their educational careers. And it's not about just how many senators are there in the Senate. It's a whole set of skills that we need, things like deliberation, right? How to have discussion as a community about things that might be contentious and difficult, and come to some kind of decision. How do we understand each other? How do we approach problem solving as a community? Things like media literacy, right, which are so important for good civic engagement. Those are all things that we need to be teaching our kids. And
does that mean, are you talking about civic media literacy in the relationship to what is the quote-unquote fake news? Or
Partly. Sure. I mean,
I read a great column the other day that said that April 1st should not be a day for practical joke. It should be for just truth-telling.
That's right.
We should reverse it.
Wouldn't it be
nice?
A treat these days? I mean, that's certainly part of it, right, is being able to figure out what's real and what's not. But I think it's more than that. It's also about being able to sort of find the best sources of information, the most reliable sources of information, and understanding how to process the information that you see, to recognize that everybody who's putting out information has a goal or a point of view, and so that might affect what you read and
this
hear.
This is different. When you talk about this, you're talking about civics in the broader sense,
yes.
Not about civil discourse.
Well, both. I think these things are important for civil discourse. So we're talking about civics in a very broad sense, not just, I think a lot of people, when they think about the word civics, they think about the structure of government, right? The three branches and how many justices are on the Supreme Court and those kinds of things, which I think we should all know, but that alone is not enough. When we talk about civics and civic engagement, we're really talking about the entire set of skills and activities available to you to participate in your community. And so for some people, that may be getting engaged in electoral politics, either as a candidate or supporting a candidate. For other people, it might be volunteering at a nonprofit organization that addresses a community problem you care about.
So is Enter the Public Square looking at national issues? Are you looking at local issues?
Again, we're not taking positions on issues.
Okay.
So the idea is if you come to an event or if...
So unlike NIPER,
we're not an advocacy group.
You are not an offshoot. You are a
No.
standalone, separate, not-for-profit.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not like a branch of the New York Public Research Institute or
right.
the local conservatives or the independence groups. You are a separate educational-based
mm-hmm.
not-for-profit.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not supporting a particular issue, but
mm-hmm.
will you develop issues to talk about?
No. The idea is if somebody knocks on your door and says, you know, I'm with Enter the Public Square and I wanted to introduce myself, I live in your neighborhood, the idea is to find out, what do you care about? And let's say, you know, so we're in the city of Syracuse, one of the things that we hear a lot about is the lead problem, right? We have a huge problem with lead paint and lead in the pipes and very high rates of lead poisoning among our children. It's something that many of our community members are really concerned about. So if somebody says that the biggest issue on my mind is lead, what we would then do is follow up with information and resources to support that person's understanding of the issues surrounding lead and help them get involved in ways that they want to.
So unlike a Siena poll, which is saying, do you like, of the following 4 issues, what's the top? What's your primary, rank
right.
them? You're saying, what is the issue that matters most to you?
That's right. And because again, the idea is we are, again, nonpartisan, not taking positions on issues. What we care about is not which issue you choose to work on, or whether you even choose to work on an issue. What we care about is helping make sure that you can engage in your community in a way that is right for you, that is effective for you, and that helps strengthen the community. So you might really care about an issue, and we're going to help provide information to you. So for example, on the lead crisis, here's some information about lead in the city. There's a public meeting to talk about this issue next week on Tuesday. Here's the information about that. Yes.
So let me ask you some organizational issues, just
sure.
because people may want to donate.
Sure.
You'll always take
that. Would be great.
So you're located in downtown Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
Office space?
So we don't have office space. The meetings and things that we convene, we are using community spaces to do that.
And so you said you're not endorsing candidates, so
mm-hmm.
you're not spending money on candidates. So I know you're fledgling, you're literally 3 months out, roughly.
Yeah.
What's your budget for a given year?
So we don't know yet.
Okay.
But
how do people fund you? Can people donate to you?
People can donate, and there is a donate button on the website. The web address is enterthepublicsquare.org. And as I said, we are looking to professionalize the staff right now. The idea is to have a paid staff that runs this organization.
And are donations tax deductible to the extent?
They are,
okay.
Yes, they are. And you know, how much we are able to do will ultimately depend on how much money we can raise. But one of the things we are working on is building an educational program for kids to
So I want to go through, on your website you say
Yes.
you're aimed towards 3 to 103.
Yes.
So how so?
Well, the idea is that, again, we're taking a
And
very...
by the way, I'm all for that 103-year-old voter.
Right. I think that we, again, are taking a very broad definition of civic engagement. And so we are trying to get people to think about civic engagement as something that is separate and apart from elections, right? Voting, which is an important civic behavior, is only one small piece. And we, of course, want everybody to vote, but there's so much more to being engaged in your community and being able to shape what happens in your community. And so when we think about working with young children, we're not thinking about teaching media literacy in the same way we would to high school students or to adults. But we can work on the skills that are prerequisite skills to some of these larger issues. So for example, with younger kids, things like recognizing that the two of us who are playing together could feel very differently or think very differently about the same activity or the same event. That's a really important prerequisite understanding to be able to engage in deliberation or civil discourse later on.
So when you say pre-K to 12, does that mean you'll be going into schools, or are you looking at events where people, young people can come to? Which of the two, or is it a combination of both?
We'd like to do a little bit of both, but we're focused on bringing the skills to the kids. And so one of the things we're going to be looking at doing as we move forward is partnering with schools to come into the schools.
But you have to, in essence, be invited in by whether a teacher or
yes,
or a district.
Or a school or a district. And we're working on building some of those relationships. But we also will be going through after-school programs, other nonprofits that serve kids, right? So we can come with this sort of package of workshops and say we can offer this to your kids.
Say those not-for-profits that serve, would those be for underserved populations that
they certainly could be?
Don't have, and I'm making a generalization, civics may not even be on their agenda.
Well, I mean, yes, but because as I said before, what we find is that civics isn't really on anybody's agenda. We are interested in getting to as many people as possible. So anywhere that somebody's interested in working on this kind of program, we want to be there to support.
So you talked about a couple of things here that if you go to your website, I wanted to ask about two other pieces. One was, you talked about polling people and asking people that. Is that a data collection role as well? So will you be doing polling as well? So
there's a little bit of an element of polling to it in the sense that you're asking, what does somebody care about? And one of the things that we would ideally like to do, we haven't begun this door-to-door field program yet. That's sort of the future project goal. But one of the things we'd like to be able to do is follow up repeatedly with the same person, right? Instead of just knocking at somebody's door once and talking to them, we want to follow up because the idea is to help people become more engaged. And so over time, one of the things that we would be collecting information on is it working? Is somebody becoming more engaged? If so, then the support and the services that we're offering are really useful. If not, we probably need to think about doing things differently. Right?
So you've also talked about fellowships. I think you may be a little far away from that, but what are the fellowships you're talking about? So
the idea there, and we are, that's again part of the next phase. The idea there is to offer a fellowship opportunity to college and university students in the community who are interested in civic engagement.
A stipend, or you're
so
not
it means that they could earn credit at their university, right? And
so internships.
Right.
Okay. For credit.
Yes, I like the word fellowship. It feels a little meatier to me.
From a logistical point of view, okay.
Yes. And so the idea would be that they would come in and have experience in these programs, right? They could participate in the educational programs, they could participate in the field programs, and also gain experience shadowing people in government, so that they can see what civic engagement looks like from the government side, right? And the hope here is that they are also learning all of these skills, but more than developing the skills for, or I should say, in addition to developing the skills for themselves, also learning about facilitation, so that then they can go on to be facilitators of civic engagement in their communities.
Would you try to also train people to run for office?
No. That is not part of the plan.
So I asked that because of recruitment issues. So Sunday Citizen ran a list of all the candidates that are up this November, and I know you'll be shocked and surprised, and most of those races are unopposed. So there's no challengers.
Right.
And both parties, this is a nonpartisan or bipartisan, I don't know which one you want to use. It's a common issue for them.
Sure.
It's tough to get people to run and put themselves out. And I didn't know if that was a role that you thought Enter the Public Square would have.
No. I mean, again, I think the outcomes for people who are inspired to engage can vary a lot. And for some people who are inspired to engage, it may lead them to run for office. That's not something we're trying to do. It's not something we'll train people for. What we want is for people to engage, whether it's electorally, whether it's through a nonprofit. For some people, it might be, I really want to work on building a sense of community, so I'm going to start throwing block parties every month. That is a method of civic engagement, and we don't care which avenue you choose, we just want you to engage.
So a couple of viewer questions, but one before that, you mentioned you're not paid and you're the executive director. Does that mean you're still teaching at SU?
I'm not.
You're not, okay. So what are you doing now?
This,
okay. One question that we just got, I told you we had a lot of emails this afternoon once it was published in the paper that you were coming on. Does this mean that Enter the Public Square is looking to flip the 24th?
No.
Okay.
Again, this is a nonpartisan organization. It has nothing to do with elections or candidates. We are not taking positions on issues. It is really skills focused on the skills that people need for civic engagement.
So with the 10 minutes left, we got a lot of other questions for you. So you came close, within roughly 5 points of a seating an incumbent. What went right?
Okay, so now I'm going to take off my Enter the Public Square hat. As
you're a public figure as far as we're concerned.
Yes, that is a nonpartisan organization that has no opinions on the past election. But as an individual, I'm happy to talk to you about that. What went right? I think a lot of things went right. You know, we obviously did not get the outcome we wanted. But the campaign was really successful in a lot of ways. And, you know, we broke records in fundraising, we broke records in volunteering and in petitioning.
How much did it cost in the end?
So I don't have an exact figure, but between what the two campaigns spent and then also what outside entities spent, it was around $10 million.
And how much did you have to raise for your campaign?
My campaign raised just over $2.7 million.
Which was the largest amount raised for that district?
Yeah, it's the most ever raised by a challenger in the district, and I think only twice have incumbents raised more than that.
And what didn't go right? Forget the outcome. I know you don't want to forget the outcome, but what didn't go right? Did you peak too early? Did you not peak soon enough?
No, I think, you know, it was I think, first of all, this is a difficult district. I think that, you know, the incumbent that I was running against, Congressman Katko, had won twice by very large margins. In 2016, he won by 22 points. And that was at the same time that this district voted for Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate by 4 points. That's a very big spread there, 26 points between them. So I think the fact that we, you know, whittled down that victory to 5 points was significant progress. But part of what I think was a challenge was sort of breaking through the congressman's narrative about himself that I think doesn't quite match up with the actions that he takes in Washington. And I think he's been very successful at telling this story, and that was a real challenge to try to unravel.
About being a prosecutor? And
about being a middle-of-the-road guy who...
And we'll be having him on next week, and we'll be talking to him about
well,
2 weeks.
I'm sure he'll be very happy to tell you about that.
Would you have done anything differently?
In the grand scheme of things, no. I mean, I'm sure we would have tweaked some, you know, with hindsight, tweaked some things along the way. It was challenging to break through when there were a number of candidates involved. We did that, and then, as you know, we ended up in a surprise competitive primary again. Right. And so we came up against a lot of obstacles, but I'm really proud of the way our team worked and managed to overcome all of those. And I really think had the campaign gone on for 2 more months, we would have won.
I'm not sure the public would have liked campaigns to go on for 2 more months because we've already started 2020 already.
Yes.
So for the presidency. We had you in the studio back in October, I think it was, because your opponent declined to participate in a forum, and our rules are very simple. If one of the candidates agrees and the other one doesn't, we give time to the opposing candidate. Did the limit on debates, and I think you were really at 4 official televised debates, and they were mainly in Onondaga County.
Yes.
Did that have an impact?
I think so. I don't know for sure. I'm not sure that we can know for sure. But I think that debates are a really important part of a campaign, especially in this past cycle. I talked to people all across the district, and people were really interested in talking about the issues. They care much less about the personalities and the gossip. They want to know, what do their candidates think about the issues? How are they going to solve these problems, and what problems do they think are important? And I think the debates are one of the best ways we can get that information out to the voters.
So we'll get the issues in 3 quick questions.
Okay.
All right. You've most likely been asked this question at least once already today.
Yes.
Are you running in 2020?
I have been asked that question. I haven't decided yet.
When do you think you have to make a decision? Because this is unlike the presidential, where everybody thinks they have to be out of the box almost 23 months beforehand.
Yeah,
when do you think you have to?
I think soon. I mean, if you look around the country, campaigns are starting.
Well, even locally here. So we have one candidate who's made it clear that they're, I think, from western part of the district, they're thinking of doing it. I know there's another candidate with a military background in Onondaga County who's also talking on the Democratic line. Does that squeeze you out if you don't make a decision with your donors and your supporters sooner than later?
I feel very secure in my support. My supporters have been tremendous, so I'm not worried about losing them. But once I figure out whether or not it's the right thing for me to do and whether or not I think it's the right thing for the district, then I'll have a decision and I'll make it known. I
said 3, so let's go to some other things. So we've got a lot of viewer questions on this. I'm going to skip all over the place. One of the most interesting questions that we received was, there's a lot of buzz around the new Green Deal. And forget who's proposing it and whatnot in the sense of any one particular individuals. What are your thoughts on the Green Deal?
So I think that the overall objectives of the Green Deal are good and very important.
And it should be said right now, there is no specific legislation.
That's right.
This is an overarching concept.
That's right.
Okay.
It is a framework for taking action. It is not a policy proposal. And I think that's one of the challenges of talking about it, because people want to know, well, but what are you talking about doing? How are you going to do that? And I think that's a very valid question, and it's one of the reasons that I am hesitant to support the Green New Deal. I think the overall objectives are right. Climate change is a crisis. Our military tells us that. And we need to be thinking about big, bold ideas and immediate action to address it. And in that sense, I like the direction the Green New Deal is headed in. I do think that it's also important that we be practical and pragmatic, and we need to be talking about things that we can actually accomplish and the steps we can take to get started right now. And I think because the Green New Deal is a framework for thinking about this instead of a series of proposed actions, it doesn't get us there. And I'd like to see us focusing on what can we actually do.
So Attorney General Barr has released a summary of the Muller report. What do you think of what has been done so far?
Well, I've heard that he doesn't like us calling it a summary. I'm not sure what he wants us to call it, but I think...
I'm not a math whiz, but 400 pages to 4 pages.
Yeah, it's a summary. I know. I'm not sure why he objects to that term.
So I'm using that word.
So I think it was a mistake for him to do that. I shouldn't say a mistake because it was intentional, but I think that his putting out that summary was wrong, especially because we now know that the Mueller team wrote their own summary of their own report that had nothing that needed to be hidden or redacted. It was written with the express purpose of being releasable.
So your feeling is it should be released with the redactions that are required by law?
Absolutely. And I am particularly concerned by the GOP narrative, which Congressman Katko echoes, that the Democrats insisting on seeing the full Mueller report is a distraction of some kind. One of the most important functions of Congress is to exercise oversight over the executive branch. The Congress in the last 2 years has been unwilling to do that, despite a lot of questionable, unethical, and dangerous things coming out of the administration. Now, the House of Representatives is exercising that oversight, and I think it undermines a fundamental democratic principle of this country to call that somehow unjustified or gamesmanship.
Do you think that oversight extends to the tax returns?
Yes.
President's tax.
Yes.
They've requested 6 years of.
Yes.
You mentioned Congressman Kanko. You obviously watched him before the election and since. Has he changed in your view of the way he handles himself in the district or on issues?
I'm not sure. I have seen him do some things that we've been asking him to do for a long time. He held town halls on the I-81 issue.
One here at the college.
I was very glad to see that. As you know, I'm sure you know, I have been asking for town hall meetings with the congressman for a very long time. I'd like to see more open forums. And we'll see whether that kind of a thing is a permanent change or is sort of an immediate response to a close election. I have hope going forward that he'll continue doing things like that. 2
more viewer questions, and then we'll wrap up. There has been some major outbreaks of measles across the country, especially in New York. Should the federal government be doing more to restrict the exemption process for vaccines? So right now there are some very loose rules that a parent can go and get a doctor to give them an exemption. Is this a public health crisis?
Well, it's absolutely a public health problem. I don't know whether it is at crisis levels yet at this point, and I have not thought about what is the appropriate role for the federal government to take in this process. One thing I do think we need to do is a better job of providing education for people about why vaccination is so important. That it is really sort of the classic example of something that you do because it is good for the public, not just good for you. And we need to talk about that and make sure that people understand that there are a lot of people in our community who are very vulnerable, who can't have vaccinations, and we have to protect them by being vaccinated. And we have to fight back against the false science that has been perpetuated on this issue, which takes us back to one of the things we talked about at the beginning with media literacy, and needing to make sure that folks across our communities can tell the difference between information that is helpful to them and information that is actually part of a disinformation campaign.
Do you have a favorite in the presidential sweepstakes on the Democratic side so far?
I don't. I'm really excited about it. I think this is going to be an exciting primary. I think we have a lot of tremendous candidates. And what makes me the happiest is that I'm seeing a lot of coverage of the issues that the candidates are talking about, not only the personalities and the horse race kind of stuff. I hope that the press focuses more and more on those issues, because that's what the voters really need to hear.
We'd love to have you back on. 30 minutes goes really quick, as you know. We'd love to have you talk to us maybe in the fall or early next year about Enter the Public Square and what is going on there, and some of your outreach efforts, not only in Onondaga County but in this area as well.
I'd love to come back anytime.
Our guest has been Dana BALTER. I want to thank her for joining us to talk about Enter the Public Square. You can go online to learn more about the organization. We'll be back in just a moment with another Beyond the Front Page with the QU Museum's new Executive Director, Kirsten Wise, to discuss her new job as well as what's going on at the QU Museum this spring. We'll be back on Thursday with another edition of Inside Government with QU County's Tourism Director, Karen Kuhl, to talk about her new job and the work of the Tourism Office. And then we'll also have Janie Hutchinson of the Auburn Education Foundation to join us to talk about this year's 5 new inductees to their Hall of Distinction that will occur in May. We'll be off next week, but in 2 weeks, as I mentioned, Congressman Katko will be back in the studio for an interview to give us a district and Washington update. As well, we'll have Assemblyman Gary D. Finch, who will give us an update on the recently passed 2019-2020 budget from Albany. We'll have Jessica Wrench in from the Cuyahoga County Chamber of Commerce to talk about Leadership Cuyahoga, not only this class, but she's recruiting for the class that begins in September. And we'll have Doubleday's General Manager Adam Winslow in to talk about the upcoming season and possibly some new turf at the field. Hopefully we'll be in by then. We'll also be bringing you Auburn Superintendent of Schools Jeff Perizzola, Business Manager Lisa Green to talk about the proposed Auburn school budget, and City Manager Jeff Dygert and City Comptroller Rachel Jacobs on the city's 2019-20 budget proposal that is they're working on now. And they'll finish off the season on May 2nd with our Auburn Large School District Forum with the candidates who are running for that office. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know that you can send us your ideas for questions or thoughts for guests. Your questions were asked today at cozguytho@aol.com. We asked them all today. Or you can send them to Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for QU Community College. We want to thank you for watching. We hope you stick around for another edition of Beyond the Front Page. But otherwise, have a good night and have a great tomorrow.